I call a study session to order at 6:08. Now, before we begin, I want to remind everyone that there are microphones. That it's being recorded and the microphones throughout that will pick up any talking. So please refrain from sidebar discussions that you do not want everybody to hear. Number one on our study session business is resolution number 1689 2024-29 comprehensive emergency management plan adoption. I call on Evan, I think, or Jason, are
I'll
you
go ahead and
going
introduce
first?
it. Yep.
Okay.
Council, tonight you have our emergency management and safety coordinator, Evan Brazitas, with us. He's going to be providing an update on the latest emergency management efforts that the city's been undertaking, including the 24 through 29 comprehensive emergency management plan. I'll turn it over to Evan.
Great.
Get the presentation going.
Excellent. Good evening, Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council. So my name is Evan Brazitas. I'm the emergency management and safety coordinator for the city of Sumner. Today I want to talk to you about the comprehensive emergency management plan. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the incident management system or kind of how things work. So we're going to start off a little bit of context. Slide, please. You should be able to. Oh,
Right there.
oh, this thing. Okay. Oh, there we go. So I want to talk about first EPIC, or the East Pierce Interlocal Coalition for Emergency Management. This is formed in 2021, and it consists of 7 cities with another one on the way. Those cities are listed there. You can kind of see their jurisdictions. These are our municipal neighbors. We're working with them to do a number of different projects, specifically training, planning, and exercises. So EPIC, as I said, exists to help out with planning efforts, where we go over things like the comprehensive emergency management plan, but other pieces that we might be trying to plan as well for specific pieces. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Also training, making sure our folks are well-trained, able to kind of fulfill the plans that we have. The exercises to kind of test and hone those skills, as well as technical assistance when we need it for certain kind of specific aspects that we might not be as familiar with in certain jurisdictions as we are in others. This does not overrule a response in this kind of ability to kind of take control of a response. In the event that we have a flood, it is fully in our control as the city to manage that response. They do provide some support, such as maybe equipment in some cases, personnel, or possibly some relief in some cases for some of the managers, but the city control would still be completely there for the policy group. Therefore, the city would be fully in control of the situation. So where EPIC fits is that it's a local level group that develops training, planning, and partnerships for emergencies. The next level up is going to be Pierce County Emergency Management. And so we work with them in the event of a disaster to kind of meet our needs as a support agency for various pieces. Above them is going to be the Washington State Emergency Management, and they're going to be doing coordination at a state level and have state resources. And then finally, there's FEMA at the federal level that provides training, planning templates, training, national coordination, and reimbursement at certain disaster levels. So if we had to declare a disaster at the local level, that would start with Mayor Hayden, and she would declare a local emergency declaration for the city. And that anticipates us running low on resources for either funding or equipment or something that we need help with. That then gets moved up to the county, who then declares a county emergency declaration. And that will unlock their ability to provide support in the way of supplies or additional resources, potentially personnel. And that they tend to have some supplies and stockpiled in their case, sandbags, masks, medication, some shelter trailers, and potentially some volunteers in some cases that they can pull out. They can also send a request up to the state for additional resources. At the state level, if it gets to that size of disaster, it's going to be a state emergency declaration. As you can see, everything starts to roll uphill. But you have to start at the local level for disasters to be declared here and then move up. State has additional resources, including different stockpiles of equipment, specialists, and many more personnel that it can pull in, such as the National Guard or different agencies they can have access to. In addition to that, the state does have some funding towards disasters to alleviate our costs if there were overruns. And then at this point, there's likely multiple municipalities, such as the Sumner Grade Fire, different counties that are being coordinated through, such as the 2023 tidal events or many of the Eastern Washington fires, or it's an overwhelming event such as OSO. And that's why the state would step in. FEMA, on the other hand, is different in the sense that they require a presidential declaration to unlock their capabilities as a agency to assist us. And that has to roll all the way up through the governor with that state emergency declaration. Some of these declarations at the FEMA level can take quick amounts of time for like a hurricane or something that they expect to be a wide range and extremely expensive disaster. And that will take days, weeks, or in some cases it preempts it. And then in other cases, it's years later that it gets declared because the reimbursement costs or the recovery costs have become so expensive for the local municipalities or the state that it is just a huge event that needs additional funding. So that brings in abilities to have more reimbursement at usually 90% FEMA, 10% state local. And then they also have different agencies that they can help out with. FEMA does not necessarily bring in supplies. They are the pocket that will help purchase the contractors, the support resources and all kind of things. Sometimes they do have some resources, but generally speaking, they pull in other departments to kind of help out with personnel and whatnot. So the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, or the CEMP, is a strategic operational plan that how communities deal with known emergencies that are both human and man-made. This was created by EPIC with vast input from our local municipalities in the creation of this. EPIC is made up of our local municipalities, and we all work together to kind of build and formulate this piece. It ties into the national preparedness goals, as you can see up here: preventing, protecting, mitigating, responding to, and recovering from disasters. One of the key pieces of this is preventing. More recently, grants have been tied to, FEMA has been tying them to terror events and making sure we prevent terror events. And so a lot of grants that have been handed out recently have been specifically focused on that piece. But for protecting, you also have terrorism, man-made events such as a train derailment or a natural disaster, mitigation capabilities to reduce the loss of life, property, and the impact of the disaster itself, response capabilities to save lives, protect property, the environment, and then meet those basic needs of humans after the event, such as mass care and sheltering. And then finally, recovery capabilities is when the last piece of this thing goes over. And the capabilities necessary to assist communities affected by the incidents and get back to normal. So the CEMP fits in that it's tied vertically to that rolling up of the county, state, and federal plans as they've rolled them down and kind of showcased what their different goals are at different levels. And then it helps us integrate into that piece. So the typical plan has the base plan, a strategic plan that's meant for kind of like the high level, generally what we're going to do, but it helps us focus for those operational goals. And in this case, we have an annex for Sumner itself and what we do for our various departments. And at this level, for our specific jurisdiction about what we need for floods and what our basic risks are for fires and other things that are in there. Tactical, on the other hand, is specific hazards, threat, or incident specific plans. That would be our rapid action plan or our wastewater treatment emergency management plan. This really helps us showcase our gaps in planning and response and helps us shore them up. It's also important for insurance reasons, as it allows adjusters to see where we are making progress and where we might be deficient and need to improve a little bit later. So because of that, it helps us lower our rates. So as I was explaining earlier, the CEMP base plan is at the top, and that helps set the stage for the annexes with the Sumner specific kind of pieces. And then finally, our support plans, such as the LHAR Rapid Action Plan, wastewater treatment. So why it's needed is it's mandated by mandated for cities and states, as well as counties to take emergency management functions based on state and federal laws. It sets roles and responsibilities for us that we'll be taking on and that we will be providing for people in emergencies. And it allows state and federal agencies to get grants out the door to us based on where we need to shore up pieces. So we're able to kind of get those funding pieces that we need to build capacity. Just a quick note, in the support annexes for maybe anyone familiar with it, there are different ways to document some of this stuff, but the language used inside this is going to be based on a department format rather than the emergency support functions or ESFs. ESFs are built usually for larger groups such as the state level. There's usually 15 to 24 of them, and they go into things like transportation, medical, and all this kind of jazz. Basically, department function means that we're going to have things for the police department to do, things for our public works to do, and we're going to break it out in that capacity, modeling it on the emergency support functions, but breaking it down so our folks will more easily understand it, be able to kind of acclimate to it. So we don't have to go through a transitional period of a lot of adaptation and learning or getting some weird stuff that's spelled out. As we kind of break it down into possibly breaking some pieces of the emergency support function into different departments. One of the things I'd like to point out to all of you is that you can check out our work through Epic on the website. That's up there, www.epiceoc.com. For anyone listening in, it's a great website for resources for your home as well. And then for everyone in the council, if you want to go over to the hazards tab, you can drop that down and look at what we've got going on for our overviews and some specific disasters, fire, kind of health safety goes into more of the COVID stance that was taken. Severe weather, as well as volcanic, which covers both mountain activity and focuses kind of on Lahar. For our next steps, there will be the adaptation of the plan proposed at the June 17th meeting. This joint plan is basically being reviewed and adopted by all the cities in the EPIC coalition. It's been looked at by the states, and the state said it's okay. So for all the pieces that they'd like to see in it. And all this, once again, has been created, and we've all had our local input fed into this plan for our local annexes as well as the base plan. So it really is a local piece that we've all kind of pooled together resources to create as a group to make sure that we can leverage that group kind of pool of opinions and voting block to make sure that Pierce County is helping us out on some of these things and we're able to get our voice out there for funding pieces. And then that kind of concludes my talk about this. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Councilmember Patel?
So, should the mayor not be available to call for the, emergency plan to be implemented, who would be the next person, Jason?
Yeah, we have both Jason and Andrea are in part of the policy group, and then we could have them initiate those kind of pieces.
Okay. And then is Puyallup part of this?
Absolutely. So Puyallup is one of the founding members. Puyallup, Bonnie Lake, and us all have actual emergency managers on staff. And then the other smaller municipalities don't necessarily have a specific emergency manager, but they have it usually as an additional duty for either the fire department or one of their other public servants who's working there.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
So is this the first plan that's been adopted by these cities together, or a revision to a previous plan?
So this is the first one that's been adopted by the group of cities. There have been potentially some plans out there beforehand, but they're vastly outdated and don't follow necessarily the same template that was used by FEMA and initiated by the national plan. So this is the update to any of the old ones, and really is though a pooling of resources to make sure that we as a group can kind of come together and say this is what we'd like to do.
And are you also, I mean, I read a little bit, I mean, it was a huge document, so I did read a little
It's
bit
only
about.
one hundred eighty-six pages.
Yeah, I wasn't into it, but I did look at the city of Sumner, the in. So I read some of that and I was just curious and so I didn't read all of it, but so I'm familiar with like
Mhm.
continuity of operation plans and things like that. So and I think that's the department piece. Am I correct?
Um,
Where you're just really like, how does like the police department will have two roles. They'll be out helping others, but they also need to be like within themselves, like what do we do for the city of Sumner administration? What is it we need to be physically here for? Does that make sense?
To a degree.
Okay.
So basically continuity of operations means that the city will be able to continue functioning if we have certain people who are available or not available
Mhm.
for the operation. And we do have to stagger people coming in during certain events because we don't want to make sure that we front load everything during a daytime operation, then have no gas left in the tank for a night operation or try to keep people around the clock. That would be unsustainable. So making sure that we have those people in the wings to make sure we have backup. So as we were talking about with Mayor Hayden being unavailable potentially to sign the local declaration of emergency,
Mhm.
we have Jason as well. And then we can have other kind of backups in place for different roles. It usually specifically revolves around the emergency operations center and that kind of function where we have different people kind of set in certain roles and lines. And so we have a chief of logistics, let's say, and then they have a secondary. And then they have a deputy chief and a secondary for that person as well. So if we have a need for staffing, we can do potentially 2 different shifts, or we can spread it out a little bit more potentially as the case may be. We don't need as many logistical folks. But this does talk mostly about the city continuing operations for both the public as well as the emergency response.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I do. Is it okay? You want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I just, with the train line coming through town, I think, I've had a big concern about, we have gas that's on the cars and then coal and various other things. Is there any specific plan, anticipating a disaster? Have you thought about what types of things you could do to, maybe mitigate it or?
So the train lines normally run a annual exercise or biannual exercise. I can't remember which one. It kind of depends on the line. So there was recently one, I believe it was done by Union Pacific. And then we have the Sounder Amtrak one that's going to be coming up this year, a little bit later. And that's specifically focused on a passenger train derailment. As for major derailment of a, let's say, a freight train,
Right.
those events are practiced on a decently regular basis. I believe, Carmen, did you go to the last one?
Ryan did.
Oh, Ryan, there we go. And other people from Puyallup actually attended as well. So there has been some purview on that. As for what to do during one of those, I have some specific knowledge about kind of plume models and other stuff from my weekend job with the Guard, where I'm aware of kind of how that would work out with trying to plan for that kind of piece. As for a specific plan, we don't have one in writing at this time, but there are some general abilities for us to kind of roll with it.
I'll just add in that, we also have regular tabletop exercises and train derailments have been discussed at those. And then I'd also just say that if we were to experience a train derailment, especially one that had any sort of hazardous materials or even a passenger train where you have multiple victims, it's going to overwhelm our local resources within minutes.
Yeah.
And we'll be relying on not only our partners at Epic to help us immediately, but we'll also be looking towards the county and probably eventually the state for assistance. So we'll be overwhelmed within minutes.
But at least I feel a little better knowing there is ongoing, monitoring, and so that helps, because, I live a block from the train track, so I know, it's not that many minutes that we don't have a train go through town, so it's just important that we keep on it. So, but it's good to know there is a plan.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Bowman.
I really like Deputy Mayor Cole. There's about 8 million pages, but was really good to read through it, you know? So I appreciate all the effort that you guys put into this. One of the things that I found just in reading it that for me personally, I would find value in is that in the instance of a major devastating issue, it would minimize the chaos that could occur, you know, in the area. So if something were to happen, let's say something happened and it hit probably 3 or 4 cities, maybe it was Ording, Bonnie Lake, Puyallup, and Sumner. And so the mayors are the ones, and then within the entity, I saw an infrastructure there. So if it hit all 4 of those cities, who ensures, I mean, do the mayors all come together? I mean, now it's more of a global issue and not just a city issue. So who ensures this gets followed? And do the mayors come together as a team and make decisions? What's that infrastructure look like? You know what I'm asking there? Okay.
Right, so it would be local. So each of the, let's say if it's Ording and it's Puyallup and it's us, that would be an example potentially of Lahar. So that kind of impact would be on the city itself at the local level to make sure that they're managing that local piece. And then we'd be sending up for assistance to the county. The mayors, for their part, would potentially be communicating with each other about like what resources they might need and might want to talk about and what kind of policy decisions, because they're the part of the policy cell. And they're directing us on kind of what's important for us to kind of go after in regards to response and recovery. And then we initiate on the tactical level of making sure that those kind of general policy pieces are followed to try to get out there and preserve certain pieces of infrastructure or certain areas of the city, trying to focus on getting people out of their houses and kind of what that would look like potentially. But because the vast nature of Lahar, there might not be much time. So that's why we have a rapid action plan specifically designed for Lahars. And that gives us our initial action steps to kind of give us that framework to base the response off of. If it was something like a train derailment that affected somehow all 3 of those municipalities, there would be communication between all 3 of them, but it would be the emergency managers and the cities themselves, which would be handling their local responses with assistance from the county to kind of coordinate passing of resources in some cases.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you see me coming, I hope you can jump in a moving car.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Just one little thing, and this is really just about wording. So this is a document that's you know, sort of going to be live through 2029, assuming there's going to be updates and all of that. Only one suggestion that it be gender neutral, because you never know if the mayor is going to be a he or she or he or she. Thank you.
Which point was that? Was that in the?
Oh, I think it must have been in this, the Sumner's, the city of Sumner index area where it's just the mayor, something about she and.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly, but it's somewhere there.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Go ahead. Go ahead, Andy.
I didn't see this in there, but I was curious. One of the things, is there like on something like the pandemic that happened obviously a few years back, and it just kind of seemed like the emergency thing was like forever and ever. Is there something where policy people get involved and get it, say like, hey, we can limit like is like, because I feel like that just went on for a year. It felt like forever. Is that addressed in this?
It's not necessarily in this, but it's actually in our city code. So when the mayor declares an emergency, that eventually has to be ratified by council at the next regular meeting. So as soon as practical, there needs to be a meeting. Council at that point has the option to set an end date. And obviously with the pandemic, we were in that emergency for a very long time. We kept on extending that date. So every time there was a modification to that emergency declaration, it had an end date on it that was renewed by council.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Clerget.
Yeah, mine's more of a comment because I've been here a while on all the other plans that have come and gone, so I'm really impressed. So I'd like to just commend the city and its staff for all the time and the effort that they help in creating, implementing, and training, and to continue to adjust these plans to make them fit. So just because I don't think a lot of people know how much it takes to do this, so thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments? All right.
I'll just, I don't know if Pat Donovan with the city of Puyallup will hear this ever, but I want a big shout out to him. He put a lot of effort in taking all 7 city CMPs, kind of coming up with that base plan and then working with our staff to come up with those annexes specific to Sumner. Including our continuity of operations plan that we updated. We did a significant update right as the pandemic was getting started. Thankfully, we were ahead of a lot of our neighbors in this area because of that. So just a big thanks to Evan, Pat Donovan, Kristen Hoffman, Andy McCurdy, who put a lot of time into this plan. And like Mr. Clerk had said, I've seen a lot of CEMPs over the years, and I really feel like this one hit the mark. So.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Oh, man, I'm sorry. I have one more thing.
Okay.
I apologize.
It's all right.
So it's Jason's fault. He said something that sparked. So with that, there's a number of businesses that usually a business has to have a continuity plan. And so is there any kind of review or integration of that? I mean, this is how the city would react, but is there a way that the businesses, that the communication potentially goes out to them? Or do you think it matters if their continuity plan is in sync with ours? I mean, I know that's a really hard question. There are other states where the business continuity plan has to feed into the city, so they make sure it's integrated. But what's your thoughts on that? Or maybe you can just go think on that and ping me at a later time.
I'll take you up on picking it at a later time, but I will say right now, it's not required that
Right.
businesses plans meet with us.
Okay. And I don't know that they need to.
Yeah,
I
don't
just
if
know
it'd be
usually
appropriate.
they need to have something. So just wondering about that.
Jason, can I say something?
You sure? Come on up, Deputy Chief. I can't hear you if you.
I was just gonna mention there are certain categories where our local businesses do contribute to the plan, like hazardous materials and so on and so forth. So especially with all of our industrial buildings in the north end of town, a lot of them submit their plans to us and then those are kind of stored. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of alignment between how a business processes their plans and whether or not they make sure it aligns with ours. So there is kind of a loop where we receive those. We do some cursory review to see if there's anything way out of alignment. But it's really, somewhere way down the path where we're actually going to be able to collect those and actually do a lot more kind of meaningful analysis of them, because it's just, especially with just one guy doing it half time. Before that, it was me doing it like 1/10 time. So especially with just the way Sumner is structured, that would be really hard. We do fortunately, though, have a lot of smaller local businesses that reach out to us and we go do help them with safety planning and training for their staff and so on about emergency response. So there's a lot of kind of collaboration there, but as far as the formal aspect of it, there's still a lot of work to be done, and it would require a lot more kind of building out of the emergency management function for the city to do that. So.
And I appreciate that. And that's what I was looking for to see, especially around hazardous, spills, that sort of thing. And the other thing that drove it, the prompting, is knowing that we're going to grow, like it or not, we're going to grow. And there's going to be more people here. So just kind of thinking about that. And then, that industrial side. So what you just described is what I'm used to.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, that there are different reporting. So businesses may have a plan for like spills if it's going to affect a waterway, and that would be a whole different government organization that would respond, or if it's going to impact wildlife or, so there are all of that. But as far as like a comprehensive one that the city's going to capture all of that, that's kind of not really how it works right now. But there are kind of, I think emergency management is still kind of a growing field. Hasn't been around as long as a lot of these other fields. So right now it's a little disjointed here in Sumner because the fire department is not a part of EPIC. So a lot of these are reported to the fire department, especially for hazardous materials or fire. But they aren't necessarily communicating to us what that looks like. So again, it's just.
That's great. That answered my question.
Okay.
I feel fine. That's good. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jason,
Andy.
you're off the hook.
Hey, we got great people
Well
here.
done.
Anybody else have any concerns or questions? All right. Thank you, Evan. Next on the list, public engagement review. I call on Communications Director Carmen Palmer.
I'm kind of interested.
Nope. go for it.
Okay, I'll just dive right in. So this was actually originally intended to be part of your budget retreat a few weeks ago. So it is a little bit lighter in style. I had thought I was giving this in hour 6 of a 6-hour budget retreat. So I purposefully kept it a little lighter, put in some jokes. Thought about changing it up to match more of a study session update, but you already had the handouts, and big part of communication is fulfilling expectations. So I didn't want to change it up on you and have you wonder what I was going to say. And I figured after a deep topic like safety, you could use a couple lighter jokes anyway. So it will have a little different tone than normal. That said, if you remember from the budget retreat, we would kind of start with a statement and go through it and then have it at the end to chat about. And here's my theory for communications is a lot of times people talk about more. What more can you do? And I do think good communications is as much about focus as it is about format and what more you can do. And so that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes. This started actually as a could we review what public notice is. And so, engagement and communications is so much more than public notice, but I will start with this first topic because this is what introduced it. There's 2 layers. There's our legal requirements and then what else we do. So I will go over those. Whoops. One thing I just want to understand at first is, sometimes when people say one thing, that phrase actually means something else. And here's one of those jokes. If you're in the South and someone says, bless your heart, that's not a compliment. I don't know if everyone knew that, but it was explained to me by someone in the South that it really means bless your heart because you need it. It's a very polite way of saying something else. So one thing we will always hear, and I say this as a communications professional who's been in the business more than 20 years, we will always hear the phrases, you didn't tell me, or there wasn't enough discussion. That is always the last argument of someone who realizes they're losing the argument, right? We've all done it. I've been guilty of doing it too. If I'm having a debate with somebody and I know I'm losing, it's like, no, we haven't talked about it enough. Let me try again. So I just want to acknowledge this before we talk about communications. There is no amount of magic mix of communications we can do as a city where we won't hear that, because there are always topics we're going to be debating and challenging and working through. So these will be phrases that will always be with us. We were talking to colleagues over in Walla Walla, and they were sharing with us that they found a news article that said, I think it was from about 1941, where the mayor said, well, we're going to talk about this at the council meeting and pass this law, and then we'll never have to talk about parking ever again. Oh, yeah, right. So that was a good example of, we as a city, we manage things that are always coming back around, that always need updating, that always need debates. So that's something that's going to be with us. I use the comprehensive plan public hearing as an example of what we had to do, what we added, and then what we still heard, because this was a good example that no matter how much you do, someone is always out there wanting more. What we had to do was a notice in the paper. I don't know if everyone realizes this, but the state still requires us to put notices in printed paper. We can find it. We will have more on that later. It has to be on our website, on the project page, and a notice posted at the site. We added more because this was a big deal. There's a voluntary list. People can sign up to receive our public notices, and they get an email from us through Constant Contact saying public notice. We posted about this on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Facebook. There was a notice in the regular e-news for the people who didn't sign up to receive all the public notices. Postcard to the property owners, because there is that shoreline issue is very specific to some properties, and the meeting video on the project page. We still heard 3 minutes was not enough. The word used was rude. Not enough time to prepare. Should have been noticed earlier. We did them beyond what the state says. There were some things said about our consultants. And then, of course, unfortunately, this was the meeting that started the Zoom bombing with the racist comments. So just examples, that's a wide range of feedback, but just examples, we still had people not entirely happy, even when you go up over and above what you have to do. Actually, before I move on, one thing I want to say about public notices. I think another thing people don't quite realize is there are many kinds of public notices. There's the planning public notices, the SEPA notices, notice of application, all of that. For about a year, I covered posting those and I thought, I'm going to read up on all the laws so I know these notices inside and out. You thought the CEMP was hard to get through. Try reading all the public notice laws. After about 2 hours, I gave up cross-eyed and said, I will trust our planners and our development services because they know what they're doing. So what they tell me they need for each one, that is what we're going to do because I cannot wade through those laws. Even bigger than that, though, there are kind of two different areas of public noticing. So there's the planning and then there's the city clerk, right? She notices for you guys, notice of special meeting tonight, notice of a quorum of the council at a meeting. Believe it or not, in state law, those have two very different areas of state law with two very different sets of rules, which is a little unfair to the public, right? Because a public notice to the public is a public notice. They don't want to know, well, that was a clerk public notice or that was a planning public notice. So we have done a lot of work when we come together with what we add to what the state law says to try to build in some consistency. Because if you sign up for public notices, you should get each and every one. Might be annoying at times. You might want to know what's going into that empty lot next to you and you're going to get every special meeting and every quorum, but that's how it's going to go because it's too confusing to be like, well, did you want the planning public notices? Did you want the meeting public notices? That gets into ridiculousness. So we did do a lot of work thanks to both our planning department, development services, and our city clerk to align what we put out to be public notices. I talked about more is not always better, and yet we have added a lot more. I arrived at the city in 2006, and to the best of my ability, this is kind of the rundown of how we communicated with people. The website was a brochure. It was static. Oh, I need a web update was expected about once a month. We were doing annual budgets. So we were doing annual budget surveys. We had Sumner University where we had the 6 hours of classes here over 2 nights and people signed up and they came and there was a t-shirt at the end. If you wanted to know the agenda, you had to come to the city hall because it was taped to the front door. This is when I started, not that old. Here's roughly what I could think of the equivalent today. Love it or hate it, we have social media, we have YouTube, we have Facebook. We have the e-news that I believe we're going on about 11 or 12 years has come out weekly without fail. You still have the traditional media, still have the budget and the budget survey, which is now biennial. The website is very dynamic. You actually go to the website to do work now for the city, to ask for a record, to apply for a job, to pay your utility bill. More than that, it's another almost social media for us. We put posts on the front of the homepage. Sumner Connects gives us project surveys, project pages where people can ask questions of the project manager. And if there's no project for it, they can go to the rumors page and ask about the latest thing they heard, down on Main Street, and we will answer. So lots of different ways we communicate today, which keeps me busy. But here's the flip side of that. And I said this at the beginning, good communications is as much about expectation as it is about being everywhere you can possibly be. I wish if someone out there knows who to attribute this quote to, someone let me know because I have Googled it and I cannot find it. I once heard this and it's perfect in lots of different situations. I think this was given at a seminar about relationships, but good communication is a dance led by the listener, not the speaker. And I often use this quote in communications because it leads to the importance of us not just to be pushing information out, but to also be listening, to listen to the public. You guys talked a lot about this in the last couple of weeks, to listen to everyone, not just necessarily the loudest voices in the room. You represent everyone. I put this slide in here for a different reason, though. If this theory applies, good communication is a dance led by the listener. It also means there's some responsibility for the public to be listening to the city. I can put out as much as I want, but if no one's listening, doesn't matter. It just goes out there into the ether. So, this is a dance and we're in this dance with the public and we do everything we can think of to make it easier, but they have to listen. And that's a challenge because not everybody is waking up in the morning wondering what's going on at the city of Sumner. Totally get that. That's why I moved to the same city I worked in so that I could just make that easy. But, people have a lot going on. So they don't have the ability to listen probably as much as we would like. Here's the other joke I included, thinking we were in a 6-hour thing. And hopefully I don't offend anybody. It does use a little bit of religion, but I will do my best to make it as non-denominational as possible. But I don't know if everyone's ever heard, there's a joke about a flood, which seemed appropriate for Sumner. A city was flooding and a man's house was starting to fill with water, and he climbed out on the roof, and a rowboat came by, and they said, climb in, we'll get you to safety. And he said, I'm a religious man. God will save me. And I'm using God as a non-denominational deity of your choice. And so the rowboat said, oh, okay. So they kept going. Then a motorboat came up, climb aboard, the water's still rising. You're gonna be stranded. We'll take you to safety. I'm a religious man. God will save me. Helicopter comes, same thing, we will lift you up, take you to safety. By now the water is up to the roof. Religious man, God will save me. Man dies. He meets God in the afterlife and said, what happened? I thought you were going to save me. And God said, I sent you a rowboat, a motorboat, and a helicopter. What more were you expecting? So, this is sometimes how communications feels. You do a ton of things. You think I've got it out there. And then there's always someone who's like, well, I expected something else, or I expected something more. That is always going to be the challenge of communications. And again, it's back to, I think the knee-jerk reaction to that is we need to add. But I actually think this is the point of my presentation tonight. I think even more important is focus, because people don't have time either. They don't have time to search around. Did the city post this on Nextdoor, or did they print it, or is it over on X? Where is this information? I think we have got to focus and be consistent so that expectations, people know where to find the information from the city, or have a fighting chance to know where to find the information from the city. And, while this was originally intended to go at your budget retreat, tonight was very good timing. And I think I owe Evan a coffee, because where that rubber really hits the road is in an emergency. And we have had a number of emergencies already in Sumner. It's not the what if, it's what we have been through. We don't have time for people to wonder where we're posting the information. We have got to get it out quick. We've got to get it out accurately. So that's where we don't have time. In fact, I teased Puyallup a little bit, because they have this long list of places they would let people know if there's a lahar. And I said, well, it's been nice knowing you, because, we have to run for the hills too. And we've got 2 hours. I don't have time to be posting it everywhere. And people don't have time to be looking everywhere either. So focus is very, very important. These are some of the improvements over the years, not just the more, but I think the improvements as a city we have added, or are working to add, that I think is very good for communications. I already talked about treating all public notices similarly. I would also like to note on that does not mean I can weight them for importance to people. I've often been asked that by people. I know the mayor has been asked that, probably all of you have. One person, bless her, years ago told me, in all seriousness, well, you just need to let me know when there's something in front of the council that I'm interested in. Like, I can't know what you're interested in versus 10,000 other people versus, the other thousands of people who care about Sumner. I have to just put the information out. It's up to you to figure out what's important to you. If it was important to no one, it wouldn't be here tonight, or any Monday night in front of the council. So sometimes with public notices, and there's also legal reasons. We can't say, you guys are really going to hate this one, or, hey, this one's just fine. Everyone wants to be treated with similarities, so that's what we have to do. We owe that to our applicants. One thing we're trying to do is break down the bureau babble. I've noticed this a lot in government. I think there was something I was trying to look up the other day. I needed to know from someone else, I think the state or the feds. And they had a handy 50-page document, to answer one question on there. Really? So again, we're trying to streamline things. We don't get paid by the word. We have plenty of work to do, trying to make things easy and understandable to the public. I've actually started changing how I describe my job. I'd say I'm a translator. I translate from very technical police, finance, public works, and I try to make it so that the general public can understand what the city's doing. At the same time, we're also trying not to shy away from difficult topics. So you may have noticed lately, the print newsletter has tackled big things, multifamily housing, property taxes. A while back, we did a whole section on homeless response. So we're trying not to ground people in bureau babble does not mean avoiding the big topics either, or the technical topics, or the ones that are very complicated. As we did at the budget retreat, we tried to find analogies or ways to break it down for people. At one point, I thought about, the budget according to Ted Lasso, different ways to get it out there, but this does not let us off the hook to avoid big topics. I think, if you go back in your packet and look at 2006 versus 2024, one of the biggest improvements is people have ways to interact with the city 24/7. Even when we're not here, as I said before, because of the web-based, they can be asking us questions, they can be applying for a job, they can be paying their utility bill, even when the doors of City Hall aren't open and we're actually not working. Language line is one thing we added. This is a service. It's on our cell phones. Police use it all the time, where we can ask for an interpreter. And we dial into language line. It's preloaded with our account. And then we can have an interpreter for multiple languages, including American Sign Language, to interact with someone. We've also done a lot, I think. Remember, I talked about Sumner University and the 2 nights of 6 hours, which was lovely. But we saw attendance declining. I don't think in this day and age, maybe it'll come back someday, but it seems like people don't have 6 hours to give in 2 weeks to come sit in City Hall. But I think the flip positive of that is we're much better now at being where people are. A lot of you, some of you participated, some of us have participated in the last couple of years in the youth forums, where we go into the high school and say what's working, what could be better, not forcing them to give up their night to come to us. Same thing with the senior center. The mayor's been there. She's been at the food bank, really trying to make it easy where we're not attacking people. You must talk to your city now when you're unsuspecting, but being where they already are. So it's easier for them to interact with us and give us feedback. I also think having the 2 open houses, that grew out of there was one week where, no joke, we had Monday night an open house for the traffic and traffic avenue interchange that we had to hold. And then 2 nights later, WashDOT used our same council chambers here, I think, to talk about the Orting Highway. And we thought, this is dumb. I mean, the poor public, well, come on Monday night if you want to talk about Traffic Avenue, but if you have a question about the Orting Highway, you have to come Wednesday night. This is just stupid. So we really worked on focusing on those 2, the spring and fall open houses, and having all of our information here. All our consultants, all our other projects, as you'll notice, if you've come to the open house, now we're pulling in other projects that aren't the city, the Sound Transit Station, the library, because it's easy then for the public to hear about lots of different things at once. It's also easy if one thing's on their mind, then they get to learn about other things that maybe they never would have interacted with before. So I think that was a great addition. And then using data, the Sumner Connects pages are so valuable, not only to help the public get more information, but for us to hear the public better. One good example, Michael Cosa had to respond, I think, 40 times to the very unpopular choice on the Sumner Taps Highway to remove the second hill climb lane. Very unpopular choice. And he kept replying with the data, with the information, with the fact that the traffic modeling showed it would reduce head-on collisions by 26%. We could not ignore that. And then I went and pulled the statistics and I said, Michael, I know it seems like everyone hates this choice. But look at this data and the statistics on this page. I believe 1,000 people had gone to that page and looked at it. 40 people complained. So I said, now of that remaining 960, I'm rounding the numbers for easy math. Some of them they're not all probably happy. Some of them probably saw there were already 40 comments and decided not to add their voice. I said, but that's already a lot of people. You did not get 1,000 comments. You did not get 500 comments. So you have to keep the perspective. The quiet majority is always the hard people to hear. A couple of new things coming up. I mentioned the budget. I don't know if I'm going to do the budget according to Ted Lasso, but I am working with finance to continue to demystify the budget. That is so important to help people understand what's going to happen at the city next, to understand all these big plans and what we can afford in the next 2 years and what's being prioritized. So I'll keep working on that. One thing you may or may not know, Mayor Hayden has her fireplace because her office is so cold, so she has her electric fireplace. So she started fireside chats with individuals just for a casual conversation. So, not a big thing, just a casual chat about how things are going. And so that's been a really nice addition. I know she's talked to different people in the community, different mayors. So that's been a great way. We're also trying to find ways to build trust. I call them our reach audiences. I don't like to use the negative, underrepresented. All the other terms we always get seem to come from a place of negative. So I like to talk to them about the reach audiences. The audiences we have to reach out to. They're not the ones who are automatically interacting with the city. Could be for a variety of reasons: age, being new to the city, gender, race, lots of different reasons. And that's a long game. It's always a little hard to fill out the things because the first thing people want to see is translate into another language, which we do have language line, but we all are also trying to build trust and build the long game. The city was at when the high school did their cultural celebration, the city had a booth there interacting with people. The sole purpose was just to interact. You'll see us at Rhubarb Days, and I will have fact sheets, but most people at Rhubarb Days don't want to argue with us about the 166 interchange. So, we're there more to say hi, put names and faces to maybe the things and have a little fun with some giveaways. So we are doing a long range effort to just continue to build trust with different audiences who didn't traditionally interact with the city. Just a couple kind of final things to wrap up. Fully understand, one of the wonderful things and one of the challenging things about my industry is there is really no bad way to communicate. There are endless options, especially these days. If 5 people are on Nextdoor, someone could come and say, why aren't you posting on Nextdoor? There's 5 people you could reach. That's 5 more people. That's great. So again, focus and consistency have to be as important, if not more important, than just constantly finding more options. Again, staff cannot move into a role where we're determining what's important to the public. For that trust, it's on us to be putting out all information, whether that's posting a full agenda, not just saying highlights of this council meeting. Because the moment we do that and we miss something that's important to somebody else, we've not done our job. And then building those expectations. If you're ever in a service industry, you train your customers on how to treat you. I've seen that in multiple different organizations. One really built that trust and collaboration with the public. One came as more of a gotcha, angry. I get my way when I yell at you. So building that training, that expectation with our public is part of what we do every single day. And maintaining that expectation and reputation. That's one of the reasons we started moving to so many of us wearing shirts that say City of Sumner, because we went to so many different events or even a flood where then we saw someone say, well, no one from the City of Sumner showed up. And we realized unless you're wearing a uniform, you don't necessarily know what we look like. So that's why it was important to us to get those shirts. So when we show up somewhere, people know the city's there. And then one last thing you will probably be hearing more of through the, especially through the budget process. There are new ADA laws coming out from the federal government for municipal governments that greatly impact communications about what the expectation is of not just, for example, in videos of our meetings, not just providing closed caption, but offering descriptive text. So we are currently going through those and figuring out what that means for our website, for our e-news, for social, for our videos. So we're waiting through that, but I don't think it's going to happen without any need for some funding. So that's a little preview there I threw in actually after the budget retreat, because it came down after the retreat was held. So with that, communications is as much about focus as it is about format. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Botetto.
So if you're gonna have to transcribe all those, would AI be a benefit?
We're looking into it. It is, gosh, I can't say it as well as he did. Joe McKinney, our communications specialist, we were having a meeting about this and he said, I feel like this is one of those things, there's so many advances in technology. It's going to make so much of this better and easier. The kicker is, how long before the laws track the technology to make this easier and better? And you see it today. I think probably every rational person will know it's probably better for our public notices to be on our website for free and easier for the public to get. However, the law at the state says we still have to pay hundreds of dollars to put it in a printed newspaper. Because the law has not kept up with the technology and the advancements to make things easier to find. By the way, a side note on that, I meant to circle back to that. We did improve that within the law. We moved it from the News Tribune to Sound Publishing because the News Tribune put it behind a paywall. And it was almost impossible. I knew our public notices were there and I searched and searched. It took me about 15 minutes to find it. Sound Publishing has a nice, they do the different, like the Renton Reporters, the Enumclaw paper. But they have a nice free website that just lists everybody's public notices and they are actually cheaper for the city to use. So that was one improvement we made within the law. But I think as AI develops, as translation things, as screen readers, all these wonderful things develop, the key is going to be, will the laws keep up and how fast before the laws keep up?
And how secure are you that the AI is doing the right thing?
And then there's that,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions? Questions down there? Nope. Thank you,
Great,
Carmen.
thank
Nice
you.
job. All right, moving on, city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. For the past probably 6 months or so, the city's been working with an applicant called Bright Knight. And what they do is they are in the business of creating battery energy storage systems. So that takes energy from the electrical grid, stores it in batteries until it's needed for either peak demand usage or outages. They propose putting a fairly large battery energy storage system out on East Valley Highway. At 1808 East Valley, it's the Peterson property where the old Derringer School is located. Right now, they're going through their SEPA process and the city anticipates issuing a SEPA determination in early July. Following that, they'll have to go through a conditional use permit. This is rather new technology and it has been in the news lately, just locally here in the Covington area, but also throughout the United States, because what's against new technology, it's not always 100% fail-safe. So knowing that could be a concern, the city invited them to our spring open house. They were also at the community summit. They've been actually very forthright with us and working to educate us on this latest technology. But obviously, I think the public still has questions about it. So with that, we decided that it'd be a good use of time to hold another open house, particularly on site. And there's a number of residents that live in unincorporated Sumner, so up the hill at Forest Canyon, that have expressed concern about this. We've made sure they're invited to this open house, but any member of the public is welcome. I know that all the council members were also notified about that. Once again, I forgot to say, the open house is tomorrow night from 4 to 7. That's probably helpful information there. Council's welcome to attend. However, we can't have a quorum because it wasn't noticed. So if you are interested in coming, please contact me. I'll try to make sure that we never have a quorum of council there. And happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions?
I'll be there.
Barb's gonna be there. Okay.
Okay. Two. Anybody else gonna be there? No. Maybe 3.
Okay.
All
No
right,
more than 3.
okay,
That's all for me.
that's all you have?
Yep.
Okay. Agenda setting, anybody have any issues with upcoming council member or council meetings or?
Were you gonna talk about it, council? About our safety meeting is changed to this week?
Oh, it might.
Okay, yeah, the safety committee meeting is Wednesday, June 12th at 4, because it did fall on, they call it Juneteenth, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's changed.
Okay, 4 PM. Anybody else? All right. We have no executive session tonight, so I will adjourn this meeting at 7:08.
Correct.